Good afternoon. Welcome to the workshop, Generating Pro-Life Action. I say that so that you make sure you're in the right workshop. We have a lot of material to cover today, and we are hoping for your participation in this. Generating Pro-Life Action is just that. We want some action in the pro-life. And I'm sure that's why you're all here, to find out what you can do. And so if you have any questions, if you think that any of this should be applied in someplace else, or if you have any ideas or suggestions, things that you'd like to say about it, please feel free to do so. These two gentlemen will be delighted to hear any new ideas that have come about. The main speaker, or actually the main two speakers for this workshop, are Rob Clary and Alvin Romberg. Some of you may be familiar with Rob Clary. I'll introduce him first, then I'll let him come up and start their program. Rob Clary has been involved in the pro-life movement for about 2 years now, I believe. He has started off and has been consistent with sidewalk counseling. Sidewalk counseling is standing outside the abortion chambers as the girls are going in to get an abortion, and trying to get them so that they will talk with you for a little bit, and you can explain to them what an abortion is and what's going to be happening to them. These aren't exactly the peaceful settings that you would imagine. The people in the abortion chambers are losing big bucks, and they don't want Rob Clary or anyone like him out there. And he has had quite a few confrontations in the past, and he's also had some very good successes. And Rob Clary will be telling us about his experiences in sidewalk counseling. Also with us is Alvin Romberg from California. He's the director of the Pro-Life Medical Association in California. He's also been the one to get the information on the Weisberg find. Some of you may have heard about that. That's where the almost 17,000 aborted babies were found in a storage container in California, discovered in early '82. And the documentation of that and the disseminating of the information about it has been under his direction. Some of you may have seen the brochure, The American Holocaust, downstairs with the pictures of those babies. They have an excellent slideshow for you today, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it too. So without further ado, Rob Clary and Al Romberg. Rob?
Okay, check. Thanks for the invitation today, and well, it's just kind of like what David says, you know, there's not a whole lot of talking about it. We can talk about a lot of things, but I think the main key is to do something. You know, we've been around here all day, and we've heard workshops and lectures and looked at a lot of material and stuff, and basically everybody in this room is pro-life. You know, we know what happens with the unborn baby. We know what happens to the mother after she's had an abortion. And I think one of the main keys is to take this information where it's needed. And a lot of those people that are going in the door of an abortion clinic, you know, either don't know or are pressured into it so many ways. And I'll just maybe kind of talk about how I got started in this thing. David Gittrich, a while back, brought the movie Assignment Life to our church at Christian Family Ministries down on South Hydraulic. And when I saw that movie, you know, I don't know, sometimes you just kind of see a door in front of you, and you can do two things. You can either open the door or you can stand and look at it, you know. And I don't know, it was just something that really hit me kind of deep to think that, my gosh, you know, we're killing little babies. And why, you know? Because of our society, because of where we're at, what we're doing, the pace we're going, our priorities. And I thought there's got to be something that we can do, you know, other than just writing letters and being pro-life and wearing little feet and having brochures in our libraries or whatever. But it wasn't too long after that we had a picket out in front of George Tiller's place on East Kellogg. And I've always kind of liked to make signs and express myself on paper or billboard or whatever. And you know, I thought, let's go for it. Let's make some signs, and we'll go down and we'll tell the world what we think about this, you know. And it more or less started out from that. And we started, well, from my church, we got a few people gathered about us, and kept doing it consistently because, after the whole thing was over, everybody just kind of went their own way. And I thought, my gosh, let's don't just do this one time and forget about it for a half a year. Let's keep going with it. I spent 2 hours making that sign. I'm going to use it more than once, And basically at that time, I didn't know a whole lot about the abortion thing or anything. I just, all I knew was, hey, this is wrong, and we got to do something about it. And I didn't know a whole bunch about the semantics and all of the linguistic garbage that goes along with it. But we started picketing Wesley Hospital pretty consistently on Saturday mornings, about maybe 4 or 5 of us, just a small group. And handing out literature. One of the things that I'd like to hand out is the Keith Green tract that has a lot of good information about abortion and stuff. And we were coming across people that were going into the hospital and handing them literature about abortion and just more or less trying to be as informative as we possibly could. But I always kind of felt like a need to get closer to where the abortions were actually taking place. And even though they are going into Wesley's such a big place, you don't know who's going in for an abortion or who's going in to have their tonsils removed or whatever. And so it wasn't too long after that till we started going down to the abortion clinics like on East Pine and Wichita Women's Center on North Market, where they do primarily nothing but abortion. And boy, I tell you what, when I got down there and got on that sidewalk, we were just picketing at the time and handing out literature and stuff. To see the people go in and to see them come out, I remember the first thing I saw one time was a Vietnamese man pulled up by the door, and he opened up the door and went inside, and I thought, what's this guy doing, And he literally carried his wife out. She was debilitated. And later on the seat, I just watched her, fall over in the seat, and I thought, man, not only has she gone through a lot, but I think of what happened to that little baby, where is that little kid now? Everybody talks about, we got to be free, we got to do what we want to do. And I think, what kind of freedom is it that causes us to end up in a spiritual condition like this, But anyhow, we were talking to people, and I think the picket signs were being intimidated for a negative deal. Like, we try to keep the two separate, sidewalk counseling and picketing separate, because it's kind of hard to talk to people sometime when you got a picket sign in your hand, and this, everybody just kind of equates that with radicalism or whatever. Well, it is, but, it just kind of hurts to try to talk to a person one-on-one with a group like this. And one day I went out to the clinics, and I was the only one there. And I didn't want to be the only one carrying a picket sign, so I didn't. I just put it down, and I had some information, and I was really amazed about how receptive people were to talk to me, without the picket sign. So, but, as I'm going through this thing and growing as we go, we kind of learn a little bit more about what works and what doesn't work. And but it's something that really needs to be done. I remember the first baby that was saved. It was just, I don't know. I could just sit here and tell you all day about how much it's blessed me to be in the right place at the right time, And I didn't even plan on going down there. This was last year, right in between Christmas and New Year's. And I was on vacation. I got a hamburger, and I was driving along, and I thought, well, I'll pull over and eat my hamburger. And I was right there by the clinic. I thought, well, I'll just pull over by the clinic and eat my hamburger, So I was sitting there. And I was, this is like on a Wednesday afternoon, about 1 o'clock. And I thought, gosh, there's a lot of people going in and out of there, And I saw this guy sitting in a car with a little boy. And I thought, well, I'm not doing nothing much. I ought to go home and get my binder, come back and maybe, pass out some information for a little while. And I ran home real quick, and I got my binder, and I came back. And when I came back, that guy that I saw sitting in the car with a little boy, he was coming out of the clinic, and he was just kind of walking to his car. So I thought, well, I just kind of meet him halfway there and hand him a tract and see what happens, So I said, hey, we'd like to take a look at this, It's just some information about abortion, and just read it, see what you think, Kind of a probing thing. You got to kind of see where people are at. And he took it, he was real happy to take it, and he sat in his car. So I just started walking again. And he got about 4 paragraphs down, reading this information, and called me over to the car. And we just started talking about it a little bit, and he was expressing to me that, he didn't really believe in abortion. He knew it was really wrong, but you see, he's, from Nigeria or whatever, and they don't have a lot of money or anything, and, they got a little baby that they just had not too long ago. And he was more or less giving me his reasons why he thought that, this was the best thing to do. And I just more or less showed him that, look, hey, if you need some help, man, I'd be glad to help you. I know some people that will be glad to help, if it takes money, whatever it takes, just a reach out, just a handout. And it was so amazing how quick this guy turned around. It was just like, he didn't even want to argue about it. I said, there's a place called Birthright. I said, let's go over and talk to him, And he was just all game for it. But the problem was, his wife was already in the clinic, and as far as he was concerned, she was already on the table. And he was saying, I saw you sitting over there, when you left. I kind of, I wish you would have came over and talked to me then. We probably could have done something about it. And I was thinking, man, if I would have just, not relied on all my materials or anything like this, but just went out and to reach out a hand, there wasn't a whole lot we could do then. I just kind of, we just more or less talked about some spiritual things and said, hey, when she comes out, she's going to be debilitated. And in the time to come, you two are going to really have to draw close to the Lord to really, get this straightened out in your life. And we more or less brought the conversation to a close. And I started walking again, and he went and sat back in his car. And about 5 minutes later, this woman came out, and she kind of looked at me, and I looked at her, like, ma'am, can I talk to you a minute? And she was looking like, where's my husband or something? And she went over to the car. I thought, that's her, And it was so neat to see, just that instant second, how, he just turned completely around, and he stopped her. He said, let's don't do this. There's this guy, they calling me over to the car and stuff, and I thought, man, we got it, And, when I think about that, it's very seldom that I ever tell this, but even when I think about it and all that stuff that's happened like that, it's such a blessing just to be able to reach out to somebody who's in need. People that were misguided. And she was excited. She didn't want to have the abortion in the first place. He had pressured her into doing it. And I don't know if you can picture a Nigerian woman jumping up and down, but she was happy. And she was... I just mentioned this offhand. Her first name is Blessing. And so if that's a key from heaven, I don't know. But, and it's been a year now, and the baby's been born, and he's a cute little kid, And they just now moved here to Wichita. They were living in Medicine Lodge, and we just got them moved here real recently and everything. So it's really kind of a new beginning for them. But as I look back on the whole situation, I knew what God wanted me to do. I knew what He wanted. And I didn't want to go to those clinics. I don't like to go to those places. When I'm driving there, I get a sick feeling in my stomach, because I'm thinking, what's going to happen today, But I also got to think of how that little child feels, too, when he's riding to that clinic in his mother's womb, And I get thinking, it don't matter how I feel, And I want to look for every opportunity that I possibly can to be in that gap, to stand in the gap for that little kid. Because he needs us, and that mother needs us. Those people need us. And, I don't know, I'm just kind of talking off my head, but there's so many things that we need to consider, where we're at in our own lives, our priorities, what's really important to us in this life. When generations look back and think of this Holocaust, who are going to be the people that stood out and said, hey, they did something, What about my grandparents? Where were they when all this was going on? And that's the thing I want to provide, is just an opportunity, for anybody who wants to communicate life to in a death situation. And it's not easy, when you see them slip through your fingers and they go in and say, no, we don't need no information. We know what we're doing. And you just see them slip through your fingers, mothers taking their daughters in, and kids, And it's discouraging, but, the blessing definitely outweighs it, And I don't want to be trying to play some win-lose situation to where, we chalk up another one here and we lose another, we chalk up another one. I remember what Mother Teresa said one time. She said, God has not called me to be successful. God has called me to be faithful. And that's what we got to rely on, that God has called us to do a mission. And whether we like it or not, that's where we need to be. And so, I might talk a little bit about kind of how we go about it. One of the things I put together, like I said, the whole key is to be a communicator. And this is something that I carry with me out there. We don't carry picket signs or anything. We just carry binders with information that has pictures of the baby in the womb. And if, when somebody's coming up They pull into the car, and they're getting out of the car just to be there, just to say, hey, before you go in, can I talk to you a minute? You'd like to look at some pictures or something? A while back, we were meeting a lot of opposition to this. The NOW group, National Organization of Women, had women coming out and combating us, being out there. What they basically were saying to these women is, we want to get you in that clinic as fast as we can because these people have information that we don't want you to see. Because if you do see this information, you might change your mind. And, of course, that doesn't look real good to our movement. I don't know what goes on in their minds. But it's just really kind of sad when you're out there and you want to help people and the principles of some movement gets in the way of wanting to reach out and just help somebody. And I'm sure they look at us as a bunch of radicals. Here we're anti-abortion and all this stuff. But gosh, one girl, she had a button on her, and it had a picture of a coat hanger with a line through it. And when I saw it, I didn't know what it was. I thought, what is that? And they would never talk to us. They would, you could ask them a question, blank face, and they wouldn't even say anything. I don't know why. I guess they just didn't feel like defending themselves. And it hit me later on what that button was, and that was talking about women that perform abortions on herself because abortion wasn't legal or whatever. And I got thinking about that. As a matter of fact, NARAL, National Abortion Rights Action League, sent me this in the paper not too long ago. I don't know if anybody's seen this, but it's a really sick picture, and it shows a picture of a woman doubled over by a bed who had just performed an abortion on herself. And it said, the caption above it, I cut the caption off because I sent it back to them with some of the abortion pictures. But when I look at something like this, this is a sick sight. This breaks my heart to think that a woman would do something like this, And I can see their point as far as, we don't want this happening, and I don't want it happening either. And then the paper goes on to talk about, because this happens, we got to keep abortion safe and legal and everything. And I wrote a letter back to him, and I told him, I said, look, I really appreciate the picture that you sent to me. It's a real eye-opener. But I also got to consider both sides of this issue and think of all of the millions of babies that have been dying, brutally because of our selfishness and our pride. And I got to thinking, this woman, she had a choice. She didn't have to do this. She didn't have to do that. She could have sought help. There is help available, But that unborn child, he doesn't have any choice, And what they're saying is the answer to helping people is killing people. And I can't find any logic in that. I agree, that's a sad situation, but the answer is not killing people. That's gotten us in trouble in the past. But I can see where they're coming from, And but it's been a real blessing to be able to interject some pro-life attitudes in this situation. And I want to see more of it. It seems like at the beginning last year there was a lot of it going on, and a lot of people were coming out, and it's kind of died off a little bit. And it seems like January comes around and everybody gets kind of revved up, and we want to go again. We want to be able to be out there, and it kind of looks pathetic sometimes. You'd be out there trudging in the wintertime, and they look at us and say, oh, there's them pro-lifers again, trudging in the winter, But it's neat, man, to see people coming out and wanting to reach out and help somebody. There's all kinds of things we can do. Having material, showing them pictures, say, let's take a look at some pictures, Gosh, what's your baby look like at 12 weeks? Getting to know the people at Birthright, go down and meet them, find out what they're about, where they're coming from. So when you meet a woman out there and she's saying, well, look, I just don't know what to do, this is an option that everybody's given me, we'll say, well, let's go talk to some people. Let's maybe get you a woman-on-woman situation, And, you kind of feel weird going into Birthright or something with some stranger, and you're strangers with them, Say, hi, people meet people, whatever, It's neat to know them by name and to take them down there and say, hey, I know some neat people, Jan and people, Kathy and Jenny, and say, we can work it out. We can work it out. But it doesn't do a whole lot of good to have all this attitude and, sit home and watch TV, or what. I'm just saying that there are some neat things that we can do. And we need to check our priorities. Who's really number one in our life? And when we look back on our days, what are we going to say that we were able to accomplish for the name of Christ? Who did we really reach out and give a hand to? And the opportunities are there. I heard someone say, opportunity never stops knocking. We just get dull of hearing. They're there, man. You just look around, and people are hurting everywhere. But anyhow, it's just, I don't know where this family came from as far as their spiritual conditions or whatever, but it's neat to think that they're going to come to church now, and maybe this is a new start for them. It's one thing to get somebody saved physically. It's another thing to get them saved eternally. And I see this as just a bridge to it. It's kind of hard to lead somebody through a sinner's prayer when they're walking through the door of an abortion clinic. You got to get something before that to show them that your Christ is real, that you're not just, you're not just all word, but your action too. And so if anybody is thinking about, this might be an area for you, or if you know somebody that would like to do this, we'd be willing to start up meetings for people to meet and talk and get together, and we can get information together and get ourselves collated to really go out and really have an impact on these places. They don't like us there at all. They don't, but it's conviction. I was thinking of a scripture that says, and this is the condemnation, that light has come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light because their deeds were evil. For everyone that does evil hates the light, neither comes to the light lest his deeds should be reproved. You're not going to find those abortionists and all those people that work in those places coming down here and flipping through the literature and finding out. They don't want anything to do with it. And I get to thinking, God has not called the world to go to church. God has called the church to go to the world. And that's where we need to be. And so I've got some tracts and stuff that have my name and number on it. If anybody would like to pick up some of that stuff, maybe give me a call or something, and we can set up some stuff, and we'll probably be having some meetings that you can come to, and just talk with us. Find out, what you can do. And winter's a drag. I can't stand going out there in the wintertime. People will come in, and your mouth is frozen, and your hands are frozen, and you're trying to communicate something. But, spring is coming around the corner, and it's kind of neat to get up on a Saturday morning and be out there. And it's a nice time to get up. I don't know. If you wait until you want to go, you'll never go. You gotta be moved by conviction. You've got to say, not my will, but yours be done. I know when Christ went to that cross, he didn't want to go, but he said, not my will, but yours, Father. And that's the attitude we need to have. So, and we need to know who's behind us. So, has anybody got any questions about anything that maybe I can answer? Yes, Nancy? Oh, are you talking about this picture? Well, it had a caption on it that said, "Never again." Oh, you're talking about oh, okay. Yeah. I took the Holocaust billboard and took the caption "Never Again" and mailed it back to him, because really, we're both saying the same thing. We don't want this to happen, but their answer is, let's help people by killing people. And I don't agree with that either. I don't think that's the answer. I think moral conviction, the preaching of the gospel, is going to be what turns anybody around. I remember sitting in a meeting. Oh, they had the women's fair not too long ago here, and I come down here, and we were hanging around the place, and I sat in a workshop with Lynn Goodman of Planned Parenthood. And they went on, she went on, got to have contraception, got to have contraception. We need to be in your schools teaching your kids about contraception, And time came for questions and answers, and I thought, oh boy, And I told this lady, I said, besides all the contraception and stuff like that, I think, coming from a Christian perspective, if I know God is there, and I know God is real, and I know that God loves me, and even though my parents may not be able to be in the car with me, I know God is. And that changes my attitude about what I'm going to do or not do. Of course, they don't want to talk about that because that's religious, and we're not here to talk about religious things. We're here to talk about Planned Parenthood and contraception. And besides, if you talk about the solution, then that takes care of the Band-Aid to the problem, and they don't want to be left out of a job if you're going around talking about the solution to the problem. So, but anybody else got any other questions or anything? Or, yeah. Oh. Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, they named him Robert. Can you imagine, 50 years looking back and thinking, there's a little kid, that's alive today, man, because, you just wanted to reach out, man, and it's neat. I love it. I don't know if I'll ever stop doing this. I'll probably end up doing something else, But so far...
I just looked up because I'm supposed to repeat the questions.
Oh, okay.
You're putting me out of a job.
Sorry. Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, I tell you what. There's. Okay, you repeat the question, Dave.
He just wants to know if you're going to go at the same time every week.
Gotcha. Basically, Saturday morning is the prime time to go. That's when they schedule most of the abortions. But there's other times. Molly and Nancy have been going out on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon. They do abortions. So it's really, they do abortions just about any time they can probably schedule them. But basically, it's Saturday morning is when they really bring in the meat, and that's when we try to be there. Whatever the schedule will allow. There's a lady that goes out and prays in front of the clinic whenever she can. And I think that's great, too, because sometimes these people just need a friend. I was talking to a girl that I know who had an abortion one time at Tiller's place, and she told me that she was sitting in that lobby one time, and somebody walked by the window, and the first thing that happened was that one of the nurses walked over and flopped down the window, you know? And she thought, what was that? And Lisa, she didn't even explain to her. Even if the nurse would have said, well, those are some people that come out here all the time, and they're against abortion, and they help people, that would have turned her around right there. But no, it wasn't that. So we work it out to whatever, schedules can be worked out, Saturday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Mondays, whatever,